welcome to Resilience Radio.
Well, it's good to be here, and I'm here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Muskogee Creek Nation Reservation.
Woohoo! So, a lot of people acknowledge you as Joy Harjo writer, Joy Harjo poet laureate, but I feel that you're Joy Harjo rock star to me. So,
Well, it's funny, a lot of people don't know I'm a musician, and I always thought somehow the poetry crowd and the music crowd would come together, but it's not always that way. Sometimes they do, but maybe this album will facilitate that.
well, being, radio, music, talk type program, I was inherited a ton of music. So a
Mhm.
few requests for Joy Harjo music came in. And then that's how I was introduced. And then my dad said, she's a poet. Here's a stack of her books. I said, I don't want to read. I want her to sing to me. So how awesome is it that you get to be rock star right now?
Actually, I don't know that feel I love playing. I mean, I love playing music, but as you know, we've been in a COVID hideout. So I I feel like I'm a rock star in my own, in my apartment.
Yes, that's how we are all living right now. We're living out our being in like a 200 square feet spaces. So yay.
That's right,
Um,
right. But we connect digitally, and that's what's been going on.
I know, but I'd rather sit next to you with your saxophone, but one of these days.
One of these days, not too far.
I can't wait. The second they open the gates is going to be like the Berlin Wall coming down again.
Uh-huh. That's true.
Oh, help us. So, Joy Harjo, today I pray for my enemies. Why? Why would you pray for your enemies? Joy, that's so hard. Just the title itself is like triggering. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the root of it. Okay, let me deal with my mail here. So the root of it is the stories that there's stories that always compel me. And there are those stories where somebody murders somebody and then the family makes a connection. Someone in the family makes a connection. And the one who murders is able to come to terms in a very profound way with that kind of interaction, so that there's a healing that kind of takes place. And it reminds me of, in our Muskogee Creek tradition, we didn't have jails. There were ways to make amends and to right, for the most part. Sometimes if somebody was a threat to the life of all the people, you had to do something, or for self-defense. But overall, there were ways for people, if there were crimes committed, to make amends and to I guess be educated or learn another way. Because that's what we're all here for, is to continue to be challenged and to grow our spirits.
You're
And so, yeah.
absolutely right on that, because I feel that somebody hurts you, and since you can't heal or forgive, then that grudge becomes generational.
Exactly.
And I've seen a few of those stories where the mom of the murdered victim and the murderer end up pen pals and forgiving him and him getting, but those are so few and far in between. So is that the justice system failing people, or is that just human nature being human nature?
Probably a little of both, because I would find it very difficult. I mean, I would think that would be one of the hardest things to do, is to lose a family member violently. And the first instinct is to go after whoever destroyed something so incredibly important and beautiful to you and your family.
Yeah, vengeance.
Yes. So to get to that place, I guess it, in my writing, whether it's poetry or music, I try to go to places that maybe I don't quite totally understand. There's a lot I don't know, and I'm at the age where I realize I don't know anything, and then when you're in your teens or your 20s, even early 30s, you might think you know everything, and then there's a shift that happens. But yeah,
All right. So way to go to get my money back if I don't know anything anymore. But I guess part of me feels like that's terrifying to learn that you know nothing and we're in a continue learning process. And part of me would be relieved that I don't know anything and I don't have the burden of sharing anything.
Well, we do. I mean, I'm not saying that I out know it's I know what's of my experience, but I think what's important to do when you're here, and I try to do it with every creative project, including I Pray for My Enemies album, is to go into places that I don't necessarily have understanding, whether it's musically or creatively or by theme or story, and I want to explore that to understand it a little more.
Most people don't like to go to those uncomfortable places.
I don't
Or
think you can be an artist and not go to those places.
oh, I think that's kind of true. But I feel like you go to those places and when you come out of those places, your writing and your music encourages us to sit with those concepts and ideas.
Mhm. Yeah, they encourage me too. I mean, a lot of these a lot of these words are they come through because I need to hear them.
But now you're singing them. So what is the shift in that? Do you write poems kind of like they were lyrics, or is this album like lyrics, written like verse chorus type of thing?
There are different shapes for writing lyrics, and they don't all have to, just like poetry, they don't have to follow prescribed forms. You can make your own form. It's just that, human nature, there's patterning. So you make your own forms, but there's, even ritual or ceremony is a kind of patterning. And we've learned that certain kind of patterns bring uh, a certain kind of aesthetic or beauty to the mind and the spirit. So it's the same when you're writing poetry or music, you're dealing with patterning to make a place for what you're doing. And sometimes I'll just write a song as a song. And sometimes a poem, I don't say force it, because if you force it, it doesn't work. Sometimes a poem like Equinox became a song. And other times, they become both. So it just depends. It depends. Some things I will write with music. Some things I write and put it to music. Sometimes I would just write the music, and there's one song on there I don't have any words to it. Mhm.
But you talk about form, right? But then you go jazzy, the kind of musical genre that has a very fluidy different form. So I'm finding that kind of comical.
Comical.
Well, it's funny, that there's a cadence to
Yeah.
poetry or certain things, and then when we read poetry, your mind comes to certain conclusions on what sounds are. But then, you talk about form and ceremony and things being kind of in an order, but then you pick jazz, the one that doesn't like to sit still.
But it does. You know what? I think jazz is one of the most difficult things to play because you are dealing with form in a way that you move in between, but it's difficult. I think it's the most. It requires the most. I don't know. All music is different. All music has its requirements, but for me, it's the most challenging, and I love it. Now, the hardcore jazz, classic jazz people will say that album is not jazz. It's not jazzy. Non-jazz people will hear it and say, "Oh, but there's a saxophone." And I am going a little outside with the horn lines because I do my own thing. And so I do. I'm not. somebody who's been brought up in the jazz standard tradition, and I know a lot of those standards. I'm familiar with them, and I like playing them on my own. But I find my own. I have found my own way, and so it doesn't always follow those. It doesn't follow those kinds of forms. So yeah, it's different. But even then, it is following. It has to follow precisely within those forms, or it won't make sense at all.
Well, yes, to communicate and articulate what you're trying to get across. But I dig it. I heard it and I was like, yes, because um your earlier album had kind of like a mellow acousticy rock to it. This just seemed to slap you in the face and I liked it.
Uh huh.
There's just more like, so jazz, funky rock jazz. Maybe we just make up an own, like its own genre. It's the
I've al-
Harjo.
I've always done that with my. I have a new memoir coming out in the fall called Poet Warrior: A Call for Love and Justice, and my editor said I've reinvented memoir. Yeah, so I'm just I sometimes it gets frustrating because I would like to have the respect of the jazzers, and I would like to be able to follow along these exact classic lines, but I have a hard time with that. I have written in verse forms, and some of it, I can do that. But what compels me is trying to find a form that fits where I come from, that is Muskogean and yet Indian school, and hanging around, in high school at Indian school and that kind of vibe, where we used to listen to Motown and Frank Zappa and Jimi Hendrix and all those people, as well as I remember listening to Taos Round Dance, and there's all these kinds of influences. I love Middle Eastern music, so I have a wonderful oud player from Iraq on there.
I saw
Yeah.
that. The variety of other artists that you collaborated through this album
Hmm.
was really interesting and refreshing to me.
Yes, there were a lot of, well, my co-producer Barrett Martin, he was part of that grunge Seattle rock scene. So a lot of those special guests, I mean, my husband's on there as a special guest playing the surdo drum, and my two stepdaughters are on there singing with me, and then doing that. I love their back and forth on Stomp All Night, like girls in the middle of the night at the stomp dance. But yeah, he pulled in his, Peter Buck, REM, Rich Robinson, I think Black Crows. He pulled in, yeah, Chris Novoselic from Nirvana. Um, he pulled in, he asked his friend. They like the music too. They listened to it and they said, "Wow, we want to play on." One of them showed up and said, "I just want to play on this. I like it." So that was cool.
So did becoming poet laureate kind of give you the freedom now to now say more what you want to do? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, did it give you more of a platform or permission to say, I'm going to team up with like every cool musician from the past 25 years? And
I don't know that it gave me the freedom to, but certainly I've been doing what I've been doing for years. And I went for years without that kind of recognition, without my books getting, people would know, I had respect. But
absolutely.
I went for years and years. It wasn't until my 60s that I began to get professional recognition in the manner that I have. I've always had an audience, and people have respected. I've had a great respect for my work, and I've been lucky that way. But it wasn't until the laureateship, I think, that it really, even right before, I tried for years to get a Guggenheim and was turned down. and but that's for your listeners, you got to keep, I keep trying. I'm determined, and I do it because I love it, not because I'm trying to set any records. I mean, I didn't know I was going to be poet laureate, but certainly that gives you a certain visibility that nothing else. It gives you a visibility. I don't know that it's enabled me to do, what I couldn't do before. I'm still doing what I've always done. It
Now,
just
do you,
it gives you more visibility, but it also, what's exciting about it. It gives more visibility to Native people.
But bingo. So do you owe the government like X amount of words?
No, I don't.
Oh
It's an
no.
honorary, it's essentially, this is what I was told. The poet laureate is essentially an honorary position to acknowledge your place in American poetry. And so that you don't really, I did a Library of Congress project called Living Nations, Living Words that highlights contemporary Native poetry on a digital map that is up on the site, and a book will be out of those poets. We wanted to make it a lot larger, but there's only so many staff and then me here. So if we couldn't include I wanted to include every Native poet. But we couldn't do that because of, you take staff and time that we didn't, time and people hours that we didn't have. But you don't have to, essentially, you don't, it's up to you if you want to do projects. And then right now, we've been working on, it's not just me, it's the staff, the poet laureate staff at the the Poetry and Literature Center at the Library of Congress. We all work on this together. So we're working on a toolkit for teachers that can be used in, English classes, but social studies that say, here's Native communities. These people are part of Native communities, and here those communities are on a map. And in the map includes no names, no state lines. It's all just the earth and water.
Love it. I love it. So your platform to support Indigenous voice is huge. And I feel that poetry to me was always so private and personal and a way to process and express certain things. So what was that weird point in you where you decided I'm going to try to get published? That's a very vulnerable state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so different now. I mean, it's even like making music. A lot of those, some of that I did on my kitchen table. That recording, some of that American Sunrise I did at my kitchen table. Some of the voices, like some of the singing, I thought, I don't necessarily like the way that sounds. So I just went into my bathroom. It's got a nice resonance, and did some of the, did some of it there. So it's different than when I started out writing as a poet. I mean, anybody can publish on, there's all kinds of online, people can set up their own sites, their own communities. It's just wide open now. But when I was coming up, it wasn't that way necessarily. And I, I came up in, it was different. I mean, I grew up with not knowing there were Native poets really. And then when I was a student at Indian school at IAI, when it was a Bureau of Indian Affairs school, there were student poets. We were in all the arts, very creative. We natives are very creative. And but when I went to the university, I was an art major. I liked doing art. I didn't like standing in front of people. And I remember once telling somebody, I will never get on a stage because I had horrible stage fright, and I was called the shyest kid at Indian school, which is really shy. And but there was something, I don't know. I think in that memoir that's coming out, I say that I still don't understand it. It's almost like it was given to me to do, that I made some agreement before I came in to do this thing, to be helpful. I mean, we're all here, we're all given our gifts to be helpful, whatever they are. Whether you wind up on a stage or whether you're helping clean the earth and picking up trash, whatever, we're all important, and we all have a place, and we all have gifts that are meant to be shared. So I don't really understand it. I love poetry, I love sound, I love music, I love language, words, people, this beautiful earth. And somehow it was given to me to do, and I don't really understand it, except that it's a teacher. This path has been quite a teacher for me, and I just keep doing things. I just keep moving and creating.
Well, yeah, you got to give yourself some credit. You could totally ignore, you know, our ancestors screaming at you, or you can just go with this path that, I don't know. There's some days I wake up really feeling like I did choose this, and then there's some days I'm like, I wouldn't have, but um as Indigenous people, I feel like there's a pressure to be that stoic, calm, only write about the birds, forgiving type of person. And I love new album like Fear. This is a real thing, fear. And another uncomfortable thing to sit with that we don't like to think about, that we experience, but we don't want to let it into, we don't want to process it.
Right. But
It takes over your body.
We're human beings. And I remember when I was a student, an art student, and starting to write poetry, and I was thinking I remember it came to me that if I did anything in my life, is that I want our people to be seen as human beings.
Well, and that's the common core that keeps us together, that will find common ground, that will allow conversation in us to move on, is when we see the human being in each other. Should we say humaste? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know about that, but yeah, about seeing the human being, sure.
But it's hard because for some reason, and I don't know what is going on right now, we seem to want to find reasons to stratify and split. Generally in the country and even within our native communities, blood quantum's a big drama right now. Joy Harjo, where can everybody access the new album and all your writings?
Well, the albums are all on digital. If you want a hard copy, a CD copy, you can order it from Magic City Books in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Woo!
And, yeah, and the books are you can get it on any place you get books, you can order it. It's best to support your local bookstore. And again, Magic City Books here in Tulsa is where I send people to. And if you order from Magic City Books and ask for an autograph, they will call me up. I'll walk 2 blocks over there and sign books. And CD. I will sign the CDs too.
Joy Harjo, that is incredible. I appreciate your time. You are such an amazing, busy lady, and I will bug you soon.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
All right. Take care of yourself, woman.
Okay.